Lesson 8.1, Populations and Samples. In this lesson, we're going to determine if a sample is representative of a population. Now look at the solve and discuss it. The table shows the lunch items sold on one day at the middle school cafeteria. Use the given information to help the cafeteria manager complete his food supply order for next week. So when you look at the table and you identify the 4 items and how the cafeteria manager might place an order for next week, what do you think the cafeteria manager should order the most item of? Turkey sandwiches, hot dogs, veggie burgers, or fish tacos? And why do you think that? What information from the table would help support that information? In this lesson, you're going to do a lot of inferencing. Okay, inferencing in math works very similar to inferencing in literature, or writing, or science, or social studies. You're looking to make conclusions based on the information that you have. Now let's examine example 1. Understand populations and samples. The 2,468 registered voters in Morgantown are voting on whether to build a new stadium. Morgan and her friends really want the town to vote in favor of the new stadium. How can they determine how the voters will vote before the day of the vote? Morgan and her friends could ask every registered voter or the entire population of voters in town how they plan to vote. However, surveying 2,468 people takes a long time. Morgan and her friends may not be able to survey the entire population of voters. Now, in this question, as in all questions, a population represents an entire set or an entire group. In this case, the group is a group of voters. So we need to look for another more efficient way to get some information about the question that Morgan is wanting answered without asking the entire population of voters in town. So that's where we get down here to the second part. Morgan and her friends could ask a subset or a sample of the registered voters in town how they plan to vote. Surveying a sample of voters does not take as long and is more reasonable to do. Morgan and her friends would be able to ask 100 or 200 people. In this case, as in all cases, a sample or that subset is simply a smaller group that represents everyone in the population. So in this case, the sample would be the sample of people that can vote. So let's think about what that means. In a case where Morgan is looking to determine how the vote will happen and whether or not they would vote in favor of a new stadium, she wouldn't want to go ask students her age who are not eligible yet to vote. Instead, she would want to survey or ask a smaller sample of people that can vote. In other words, people that are 18 years or older, because they make up a smaller group out of that entire population. Now take a look at the try it. Miguel thinks the science teachers in his school give more homework than the math teachers. He is researching the number of hours middle school students in his school spend doing math and science homework each night. Now you're asked to use our 2 vocabulary words from example 1 to complete each of those statements. The population includes all of the students in Miguel's middle school. In a small school, it might be possible for Miguel to survey everyone. But in a school the size of ours, that would be nearly impossible. A possible sample is some students from each of the grades in the middle school. In other words, we need to sample each of the people that make up the population. So at our school, we would need to survey students in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade in order to get a better answer to the question. This leads us next to example 2, where we're going to learn how to describe a representative sample. Morgan decides to survey a sample of the town's voting population. How can she know that the survey results from the sample of voters represent the position of the entire town's population? So she wants to be sure that the question that she asks about building the stadium is going to be answered not only by just the people who can vote, but by a sample of those voters who represent all the different demographics that make up her entire town's population. In other words, she has to look for both males and females, and she needs to look for each of the ethnic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds from her entire town population. This is what we call a representative sample. A representative sample accurately reflects the characteristics or the things that make up the entire population. In a random sample, each member of the population has an equal chance of being included. A random sample tends to be a representative sample. So Morgan can survey a random sample or randomly selected group of voters to make sure her results represent the position of the entire town. Now let's look at the try it. A produce manager is deciding whether there is customer demand for expanding the organic food section of her store. How could she obtain the information she needs? Well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to identify who is the population in this problem. Is the population every person who shops at the store? Is the population only the people that shop at the store in the organic food section? That's a tough question to actually answer. Since it's a produce manager, produce is your fruits and vegetables, he or she may want to survey or get the information that they need from a sample of customers that shop at the store. Maybe more specifically, the shoppers in the produce section. If she understands or he understands the needs of the shoppers, then he or she may find that they should or should not expand that organic food section of the store. So what we really need to do is focus here on how she can obtain that information. Okay? And she could use a random sample of shoppers. And we want to do the random sample of shoppers from her store. Because if she just goes out and asks people who don't currently shop at her store what they want, they may not give her an accurate picture of the customers that she already serves. Example 3 goes back to Morgan and the stadium. How can Morgan generate a random sample of the town's voting population? In other words, how can Morgan be certain that she has covered all the necessary demographic information for her entire town? She wants to make sure she hits males and females. She wants to make sure she hits older voters and younger voters. And she also wants to make sure that she hits all the different ethnic backgrounds of the people in her town. So there's a 5-step process to do this. The first step is always to define the population. You have to know who your population is in order to find a subset of that population or a smaller group. In this case, the population consists of registered voters in her town. Step 2, choose the sample size. Morgan plans to survey 100 registered voters. Now here's another key. The larger the sample, the more confident Morgan can be that the results represent the position of the population. In other words, if she's got 2,400 and some odd number of people in her town, registered voters in her town, and she only surveys 10 people that she knows, will she actually get an accurate picture? Probably not. So the larger her sample size, the more confident she can be that her results will represent the position of the entire population. In step 3, you can make or acquire a list of all the members of that population. Step 4, assign a number to each member of the population. And finally, step 5, generate a list of random numbers to select the people that are included in the sample. In other words, this random sample could be, let's say, every 10th voter. Maybe she does every 8th voter. As long as she ends up with at least 100 people in her survey, she can be fairly confident that her results will hold true in the vote. Now let's complete the triad. Ravi is running against 2 other candidates for student council president. All of the 750 students in Ravi's school will vote for the student council president. How can Ravi generate a representative sample that will help him determine whether he will win the election? So think about this. Ravi probably has a group of friends that are willing to vote for him for the student council president. But his friends don't necessarily represent the entire population's opinion. So out of the 750 students in Ravi's school, Ravi will need to make sure that he generates a list of all the grade levels so that he represents students in each grade that can vote. He needs to make sure he includes both male and female students. And he doesn't want to focus on just a certain group, such as students in one particular class, because not every student would be enrolled in that class. So he could easily generate a list of all the students. And after he does that, perhaps he waits at the door as students are entering the building, and he asks or surveys every 5th, 8th, or even 10th student who walks in the morning. Doing so would give Ravi a better idea of how the students will vote in the upcoming election. This method also ensures that Ravi will undoubtedly get students at all grade levels, male and female, and each ethnic demographic area. We are not going to complete example 4, so we can cross that one out. We're not going to be talking about generating multiple random samples and making conclusions from that.